Welcome everybody to this Planning Committee meeting on the 5th of November 2024. I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, Chair of the committee, and Dale.
I'm Councillor Dale Rook, Vice Chair of the committee.
Craig O'Connor, Head of Placemaking.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Amy Longford, Development Management Team Manager.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Team Manager.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor to Planning Committee.
Richard Ray, Paralegal.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Richard, I've got a note, it's quite quiet online. Is there any way we can jack it up? Members online, can you just tell us when the sound improves, please? No. Is that better now? Jill, can you hear?
A little better, maybe.
Yeah, we can see.
No, it's still very quiet, Phil.
Is it? We're
yes, it's very quiet for me too.
yeah. We've got.
Councillor Webb's having problems accessing the meeting.
Yeah. We've got a situation, members online, that you're very, very loud in the chamber, but it's the opposite, the other way around. Councillor Thomas, so that we don't have our screen too cluttered, can you turn your camera off until such time as we can?
Yeah, fine.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
All the volumes are up.
Okay, well, we can't do any better at the moment, so those online, if you can bear with us. So we'll go to the...
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Webb is trying to get access online. Just wondered if Democratic Services could phone Councillor Webb.
While Richard's doing that, we go to the agenda, and apologies for absence.
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Birch.
Okay, thank you. And any declarations of interest? I have a declaration on DM 2024000985. It's a personal but non-prejudicial interest in my son used to be a work colleague of the applicant. And I believe Councillor McKenna, when she joins us, she'll be joining us soon, and she'll be making a declaration as well. Can I have anybody to propose the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor McConnell, Councillor Powell, thank you. Can everybody make sure that their sound is turned off, please? Yeah, okay. Right, we'll go to the applications then. Before I do that, can I remind everybody remotely to use the hands up in the chat and to keep your cameras on so that you can vote. And members, there's been quite a lot of late correspondence with regard to these applications. Can everybody indicate whether they've read the late correspondence or not? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so the first one on our list is DM 20230131. Unfortunately, we've had to pull that one. That's going to have to be dealt with at another date. So the first application we'll look at today is DM 20230169, which is the construction of a building to house munitions assembly and the extraction of material from borrow pits for the construction of surrounding blast moulds at BAE Systems at Glascoed. Andrew, you're presenting this one.
Chair, I think I'm going to declare an interest in that one, if I may, and leave the room.
Okay, Councillor Howells, if you could do that, please, before Andrew makes his presentation. Yeah, we're just going to delay just a minute. We're waiting for Councillor Webb to connect. She's having connection problems.
Try and bring her back in, Chair. She was here or not?
Yeah.
Yes, she is there.
She's there now?
Well, the screen is there. I can see a face. There's an image. Yes, the screen was there. The background's there.
Should we try and get it back?
Councillor Webb, can you hear us? Please let us know. Okay, we'll have to start. Sorry to everybody at the back about the IT problems, but we do try and be as inclusive as we possibly can, and if we delay a bit to get somebody else online, then that's what we'll do. So as I say, the application before us at the moment is the BAE Systems, and Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members, and to those joining us online and in the chamber this afternoon. So the Chair has just explained the development description, and yes, this is the site at BAE Glasgoyd. And just as a point of clarity, to confirm the reason the application is presented to you today, members, is that there have been objections from at least 5 separate households, triggering the threshold to be determined via planning committee. Now, owing to the nature of the use of the site and issues associated with this, we did not visit the site yesterday as part of the general site visits. However, members have had the opportunity to view the submitted plans here in County Hall. So, turning to the slides, you should hopefully be able to see on screen, and for similar reasons to that as the site visit, the submitted plans are not shared in the digital presentation today. But we do have some images that I'll just talk through. So this identifies the site, which, as you can see, is to the south of Monkswood, and that's its general location. And there's also an aerial view of the site, which is taken from Google imagery, which is a useful indicative view of the site, its size, and the surrounding mature vegetation. So, firstly, in terms of the planning application that's before us, and turning to the matter of planning principle, the proposed new build does not involve any change of use at the site, which is to its lawful planning use as a munitions factory. And for the purposes of policy context, it is located within the open countryside. However, Strategic Policy S8 of the adopted LDP does support the development of existing and emerging key economic sectors and seeks to enable the diversification of the county's business base, especially with regards to high-order economies of the future. So the building and the associated works with it are considered acceptable in policy principle, subject to detailed material planning considerations. Turning firstly to the visual impact of the development, the building would be sited and located within a currently vacant parcel of land within the site, and would not require the demolition of any buildings to facilitate its construction. The building itself would measure approximately 2,000 square metres and would be of standard utilitarian appearance, built to appropriate industry standards and specifications. Turning to the wider landscape interests and impact of the proposed development, the application has been submitted with a landscape and visual assessment, which has been reviewed by the Council's Landscape and Urban Design Officer. Owing to the fairly unique topography of the site within the wider landscape, as well as the substantial woodland that encloses it that I referenced earlier, no objections are offered by the Council's Landscape Officer. This is, however, subject to appropriate planning conditions. These are set out in Section 7 of the Officer's Committee report and include detailed soft landscaping plans to be agreed, implemented, in addition to a management plan. With respect to ecology and biodiversity interests, the site is approximately 1 kilometre from the River Usk, SAC and SSI. An appropriate assessment has been undertaken as part of the Habitats Regulations assessment, and this concluded that the proposal is not likely to have a significant effect on the River Usk, SAC and SSI. NRW, as required, have been consulted on this and offer no objections. The 2 borrow pits, which would be located on the east and west flanks of the site, provide ideal opportunities for ecological enhancements, and these include habitat creation, planting, a pond, and various aftercare measures, and full details would be secured via appropriate planning condition. With respects to residential amenity and third-party residential amenity, the Council's Environmental Health Officer has been actively engaged with the consultation process of the application, particularly in respect of noise impact. A noise impact assessment has been provided that included additional information at the request of the Environmental Health Officer, who has confirmed on receipt of this that there are no grounds to offer an objection on a noise basis. With regards to air quality, there are no chemical or combustion processes proposed, with no other emissions to the air other than the building's own ventilation system. Through the consultation exercise, local concerns have been raised in respect of site safety and risk assessments owing to the planning land use. And while certainly noted, the development would be subject to appropriate licensing by the Explosives Inspectorate under the Explosives Regulations 2014. In addition, the site operates under an integrated management system, and the site is a health and safety executive licensed facility. Therefore, planning should not duplicate any of the measures provided under these separate regimes. It is also noted that there have been in-principle objections received based on moral and ethical grounds, and whilst these would not form part of the material planning considerations of the development, it is important again to highlight that this is an established planning land use and no material change of use is proposed as part of this application. With regards to highways, the proposed development would use existing means of vehicular access to the site, and whilst there would be some additional movements, particularly during the construction of the development, no objection is offered by the Council's highways engineer in respect of the impact of the development on highway safety grounds or on the impact of the wider highway network. This is, however, subject to a standard condition requiring a construction traffic management plan, and this is recommended in Section 7 of the report. So in conclusion, having regard to relevant planning policies, as well as material planning considerations, subject to the conditions I've provided an overview of, the application is presented to you this afternoon, members, with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And we've got no representation from the Community Council or the local members on this one. So I'll go straight to members in the room. And anybody got any questions? Can you raise your hand in the chat, please? No? In that case, Richard, can we go to a vote, please?
Do you want to ask if propose the motion?
Yeah, I'll just do that now. Can I have somebody to propose and second the motion? Councillor Powell, and anybody else prepared to propose?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dale.
I will, Phil.
It's all right. Dale's done it. Thank you, Faye.
Recommendation.
Yeah, so we have a recommendation for approval before us. Can everybody vote no then, please? We are short on the numbers present on the voting. Can everybody vote again, please? It won't duplicate it, but just to make sure that the system has picked you up.
Yeah, you really appreciate I haven't voted. Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate that, and thanks very much.
I wasn't sure, but it's...
Yeah, it's clearly good.
Okay, so that's approved. That's 7 for approval, 1 against, and 2 abstains.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. The next item on the agenda is DM20. Can everybody please in the gallery either be quiet? You're welcome to stay, or if you wish to leave, you can leave before we start the next item. Can you please vacate the gallery so we can carry on with the meeting? Can you please vacate the gallery so we can carry on with the meeting?
I'm more concerned by the fact you're more concerned by what Owen's saying than about what you just voted.
Members, until we can clear the gallery, I'm having to suspend this meeting. If the gallery is not cleared and we don't have any more interruptions, we'll have to call the police and ask you to be removed.
I don't leave now, but Mr. Says is very shameful. We're just very disgusted that we live in this constituency. You're not very concerned about the impact on Palestinian children, are you? None of you are. Shameful. Apart from the one person who voted against her, that was thank you.
Chairman, could I just make a comment? Might help them.
They've gone. They've gone.
They've gone. Oh, they've gone. I was going to say.
Richard, could you ask Marion to come in? Okay, we're back in business again, everybody. So the next application before us is DM 2024-00985. It's a replacement dwelling, Bushes Farm, Chapel Road, Earlswood. The officer presenting this is Amy. Just checking, because we changed it, didn't we? So it's Amy.
Thank you, Chair. No, there's just a little pause for the anticipation. Yes, members, thank you. So moving on to the next application, DM 2024-00985. It's for the replacement dwelling at Bushes Farm, Chapel Road in Earlswood. So the application relates to Bushes Farm, Shire Newton. The development description on the application is for a replacement dwelling. The site is within the open countryside, set against the minor road between Earlswood and Cowend. The site is to the west of the road and consists of a stone and blockwork building accessed off a short shared track at right angles to the road. The slide shows the site plan as submitted as part of the previous 2023 application, with the blue line being the whole land in ownership of the applicant and the red line being the application site boundary. The pink is the proposed access track. The next slide shows a close-up of the amended site plan showing the proposed residential curtilage, and that's before members today. The reduction in the extent of the curtilage addresses the concerns that the former proposed curtilage extended into the sink to the rear and the west of the building. The authority's ecology officer has reviewed the application and suggests conditions to manage and maintain the value of the sink. The next slide shows the existing elevations of the building on the site. It shows the extent of the existing construction of concrete blockwork faced in natural stone from the site. The size and the form is similar to the building that has previously occupied the site. The next slide shows the ground floor plan of the proposed building, accommodating an extension to the rear and western gable to form the living room. The next slide shows the proposed building's elevation facing south, down the valley, and the next slide shows the rear elevation facing north where the ground levels rise. The rear extension can be seen with the cat slide roof and black surround with glazing. The next slide shows the western gable with a proposed living room extension in glass set at a single story with a flat roof. And the next shows the eastern gable of the building. If we could go to the next slide and pause there for a second. The officer's report sets out the site has considerable planning history, and I shall just summarise that quickly here. So in 1975, planning permission was given for an agricultural workers' dwelling just to the south of the subject building. This was approved with a condition that the original farmhouse, this particular building, was demolished or used for agricultural storage. This remained so until 2018. The top picture shows the building prior to this time. In 2018, planning permission was granted for the rehabilitation of the farmhouse. The officer's report confirms that the building had been used for agricultural storage and considered the conversion of the building under LDP policy H4, the conversion and rehabilitation of agricultural buildings in the open countryside. A structural report accompanied this application, which concluded that only small areas of rebuilding were required to convert the building from agricultural storage to residential, the extent of which was secured through a condition. The second picture reflects the building at this point. In September 2022, the local authority were notified that the building was no longer standing. The works of the reconstruction had commenced and the building had been partially rebuilt in concrete block with facing stone. The third picture shows the building as it currently stands on the site. In December 2023, an application was received for the retention of the building as rebuilt and minor amendments to the previously approved scheme in 2018. This was brought before Planning Committee, where it was resolved to refuse the application on the basis that the newly constructed building was effectively a new dwelling in the open countryside, that it would have an adverse effect on the landscape, and there's a lack of affordable housing contribution. This decision is currently with PEDU, subject to an appeal. The last picture shows the building as proposed as part of the application before members today. Whilst the building has a similar appearance to the former building, it is, in policy terms, a new build dwelling in the open countryside. In terms of planning policy, the principle of a new dwelling in the open countryside is contrary to national and local policy, except in a few circumstances, such as a one-planet development or a rural enterprise dwelling, neither of which are applicable in this case. The development description for the application states replacement dwelling, for which there are specific policies supporting the replacement of rural dwellings in certain circumstances. However, it is the officer's opinion that the building did not have a residential use and therefore cannot be considered as a replacement of such. As the previous application in 2018, the building was identified as an agricultural store in line with the occupancy condition of 1975. The 2018 application considered that the conversion of a traditional building in the open countryside to residential was acceptable under policy H4. As this permission has not been implemented, a residential use has not commenced on the site. Therefore, this application before members today effectively seeks planning permission for a newly built dwelling in the open countryside, again, contrary to the local and national policies as identified in the officer's report. So the next slide shows the pictures of the site as it exists in 2024. This shows the extent of the rebuilding and block work with the facing stonework. The next slide is the rear of the building with an element of excavation adjacent to the sink. And the next picture is taken from the north, looking south at the rear of the building from an elevated position. And the next one, there we go. And the next picture is from the front of the building, looking at the front wall. As discussed, it is the opinion of officers that there is no residential use of the land and that the previous permission for the conversion of the building cannot be implemented as the building has been taken down. The existing structure of blockwork and facing stone is entirely new and so constitutes a new build dwelling in the open countryside, contrary to national and local policies as set out in the officer's report. I must draw members' attention to the officer's report. And for the reasons for refusal. On clarification of the boundary, it was recommended that reason 2 set out in the officer's report be omitted so that the application be recommended for refusal with reason 1 only. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Amy. We now have the ward member, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah.
4 minutes or take 6 if you don't want to sum up at the end.
Yeah, could you remind me when I get to 3 minutes? Because when I'm talking, it's difficult to time myself as well. Thank you. The Planning Committee will recall that this is the second application on this site to come to the committee. The applicant asked me to bring this before the committee, and since the decision to refuse the first application, there has been a relevant Inspector appeal decision. The first application has been appealed and this second application may possibly also be considered by the Inspector if the committee follows the officer recommendation to refuse the application. The Community Council support the officer's decision to refuse the application, but the Community Council did support the first application on the basis that the planning officers had already granted residential planning permission, which they objected to in the first place. The applicant purchased the property based on having a 2018 planning permission for the old farmhouse at Bushes Farm based on policy H4 on conversion, rehabilitation of buildings in the open countryside. I have some sympathy with the applicant from the point of view that if this is totally refused, then all the applicants will be left with is a derelict, half-finished building, having spent a considerable amount of time and money with the aim of building a family home. The arguments on this application have centred around whether or not the property collapsed or was demolished. The strict argument on the demolition side being that this is a new dwelling in the open countryside and therefore should be refused on those black and white policy grounds. However, had the planning permission gone ahead, the outcome would have been the same if this permission is approved, which is pretty much the same as was successfully argued in the appeal case in the Vale of Glamorgan, as account was taken of a previous residential consent and not impacting the rural character. I do not believe that it will open the door to the strict rule that there should be no new dwellings in the open countryside, as each case is determined on its own merits. The width and size and the external materials used will be virtually the same as the old farmhouse and will maintain that character apart from a small extension on one side and a carport on the other, so the outcome will not be far off the 2018 residential permission. The applicant has voluntarily offered a nature management plan for the land, including the restoration of the track across 3 fields to restore restore meadowland and an affordable housing contribution. Whilst the track is not within the red line of the planning application, it is within the blue line of land under the control of the applicant, and so can be conditioned. If the committee accepts rather than refuses the application, then I would suggest that the committee includes a Grampian condition that the residents cannot be occupied until the track is restored, and includes a condition on an affordable housing contribution, as well as the removal of the static caravan on occupation of the dwelling. That would be the advantage of accepting the application now, rather than leaving it to the uncertainty of an inspector decision and putting conditions on landscaping, backs, etc. I would like to speak after the debate and before the vote, if possible, Chairman. Thank you.
Well, that was exactly 3 minutes, Councillor Brown. So you've got time in hand.
Thank you.
We got nobody from the Community Council or objectors, but we do have Garrett John, the agent, and you would come down to the front, Garrett. As you know, you've got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I do so on behalf of the young Wells family who have seen their aspiration for a family home and their life savings put at huge risk as a result of unforeseen circumstances and the seemingly uncompromising planning process. They stand to lose everything and have already suffered from ill health as a result of the circumstances. As you will know, it is a fundamental principle of the planning process that determination of applications has to be in accord with the development plan, unless a number of wide-ranging material considerations indicate otherwise. It is also the case that planning policy ought not to be applied slavishly. A planning balance taking into account all material considerations has to be formed. Appeal cases confirm this. In this context, Officer's stance from the outset has been and is predicated on the wrong assumption that the building was purposefully and willfully demolished and the planning permission was not implemented. I'd respectfully urge you to disregard that. Officers have no evidence that that was the case. By contrast, the applicant has provided considerable evidence that the building suffered an accidental collapse, post substantial, lengthy and costly works of renovation and repair. It would have been entirely counterintuitive to have undertaken such extensive works, which took over 3 months and at an outlay of more than £30,000, only to then undo such hard and conscientious work and demolish the building. Besides, obvious works that would have been undertaken were the building deliberately demolished have not been undertaken. There is, for example, no new slab floor to the building, rather the same as existed within the original approval. This is not a new build accordingly, rather a continuation of a build of the renovation and replacement scheme that was given planning permission and which was lawfully implemented. The same wrong assumption and purposeful about willful and demolition was adopted when it was alleged that the applicant had destroyed the bat roost in the building. Despite prosecution of the applicant, the case was dismissed by the court on the basis that there was no case to answer. The officer report before you also makes much of the planning history prior to the grant of permission in 2018. This is largely irrelevant with respect, as the building was granted planning permission at the point in 2018 for use as a dwelling, and that planning permission was lawfully implemented. Officers do not dispute that, rather what took place post that implementation. It's important to note that the scheme is acceptable in all technical respects, and there are no objections from any technical statutory consultees. Moreover, the scheme will deliver benefits that the previous approval did not, including considerable landscape enhancement, the management regime offered, which ensures the longevity of the sink, the replacement of the bat roost, the provision of a financial contribution towards much-needed affordable housing. These factors weigh positively in the planning balance and are material gains, again not reflected in the report. The officer recommendation is a very technical one, and we would say a wrong application of policy. The spirit of the policy is complied with here. For all intents and purposes, the proposal is the same and is indistinguishable from the building in use which has occupied this site for over 2 centuries and which was granted planning permission and lawfully implemented.
30 seconds. Go on.
Thank you. I'd respectfully request as such that you approve the application such that a building that has occupied this site for 2 centuries and the area can once again be a home to a young family. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for that. You switched your mic off. I don't think there was any points there that you want to pick up, Amy, was there?
Couple, yes.
No, can you deal with those now?
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a comment there that officers have accused the applicant of demolishing the building purposely. Under no circumstances have we accused anybody of doing anything purposely at all or not. As the agent correctly says, there is no evidence to say that has been purposely demolished. Unfortunately, the situation is that the building is no longer standing. The walls and the roof have gone, and therefore, in policy terms, the site is essentially a clear site. And the application is for a new build dwelling on those grounds. So that the method of it no longer being there is somewhat irrelevant. It is no longer there, and there is case law to support the application of policy of the new build. It could be an act of God, it could have been a storm, it could have been a number of reasons why the building is no longer standing, but unfortunately I must draw members back to the fact that the building is no longer standing.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Barnfield.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Amy, for your presentation. My view is exactly the same as the last time we considered this application. I would recommend it for approval. I agree with everything that Councillor Brown has said. It's a tragedy what's happened to this family, so I'd be happy to support this application. And I do worry, you know, if it's refused, this building's just going to be left there. You know, surely it's better to put it to good use. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barnfield. I have got somebody who's... Sue. It's Sue, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Similarly, I understand the arguments that are being made, but from an ecological point of view, we had a bat roost which is planned to be replaced. If the applicant doesn't gain approval for a house, we're unlikely to get another bat roost. So, and we're going to get an awful lot of little tatty buildings that are left there. So I'm struggling to see that in the grand scheme that refusal is going to gain anything for Monmouthshire and the general look of the whole land. It is a beautiful building. We've got a bat roost planned. I sort of understand the technicalities, but I'm just thinking overall, where is the good to be had in refusal? You know, I'd be grateful if you could sort of explain that to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. We'll carry on with the correspondence and then pick up the points at the end, shall we? In that case, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support this application. I know the area well, as is Monmouthshire, and you see these buildings falling into disrepair. It doesn't do it much for the countryside. So I support this application. I think also in the comments, there's comments about Section 106 money. I'd like to see a contribution of 106 money to do the repairs that are required in and around the area. So I support the application.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. If the wall had not come down during the build, then we would not, you know, the build would have just carried on, and we would not actually be sitting here at all. And I think it's regrettable, really. Although I do understand the arguments, I genuinely don't believe that we'll be opening the floodgates on this one, and therefore I do support this application. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Sorry, Councillor Hells, your name slipped down my list here, and you disappeared out of the top. So.
No problem, Chair. Likewise, I can't see any reason not to approve this application, really. I sympathise with the family. Matters are outside their hands. The main body of the finished home will look very much how it would have looked 200 years ago, and it means that it will be sustained for a few more generations. So I will be supporting this application. I do note that they are willing to give a Section 106 contribution, and I would like to impose some conditions on the construction of the back building goes ahead at the same time as the construction of the building, and also that the track that's been used for in the construction phases be reinstated as what it was before.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Howells. Before I bring Councillor Bryn in, Craig, you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in and help members ultimately and advise members a bit in terms of, I think when we're considering this planning application, we need to think about the rationale as to how we are supporting it and what planning policies you are utilising to support the application. I think we need to be quite clear as to what planning policy we're utilising and to allow a new dwelling in the open countryside. Obviously, there's national planning policy, there's local planning policies in the LDP. I think members need to clarify which policies are being utilised if members want to approve this dwelling. What policies are we utilising from a planning point of view to justify that decision? So I think just be mindful of that in terms of how when we go through this conversation. Ultimately, as well, I think this is quite a technical debate and consideration when we're considering the merits of this planning application. I think it's wise that members remember that there is an appeals process and that the applicant would have the right to go through, and that would be considered by an independent planning inspector who would view this decision and look at the merits and the pros and the cons and look at the case law across the UK in terms of this type of application. So if members were minded to agree with the recommendation, there is still that safeguard for the applicant and that due process to follow and looking at this type of planning application. Just want to give members both of those items, and I think members need to consider that as they are having this conversation and debate on this particular planning application. So rationale for the planning decision if you were to support it, and also that there is that safeguard for the applicant in terms of an appeals process. If members are minded to go against officer's recommendation today, that the council's procedure would be that it would be deferred from today and come back to the next planning meeting as well. So we need to consider conditions and other elements and consider that planning policy framework, which the planning committee would be going against officer recommendation as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch, Chair. I actually want to echo what Marianne said. Really, I wanted to add a condition, if I could, should this application get approved either on appeal or today, that we put a condition in that the bathhouse structure is completed before occupation of the primary structure, if that's possible. But that said, as the original conditions on the plot were that no part of any wall of the existing building other than that shown in the approved plans is to be demolished, I feel that our hands are tied because it just flies in the face of the local policy to build new buildings and unsustainable dwellings within the open countryside. So I'm afraid I can't support this application, and I do suggest that they go to appeal on this. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I'm going to be the odd one out. It's my sympathies are with the family. Yes, they want to have a home and everything. But when we're doing planning, we're looking at the buildings and the rules and regulations. It's very easy to let yourself be taken into the personal view on everything. The ruling is that if a building is only a certain amount of bricks or stones left, it is no longer a viable building. And when we first went to look at it, it was less than it is now. And it could start a precedent. Once you start to do that, anybody who's got a couple of bricks, if it's only about a yard high, they're going to say, oh, well, you passed that, so you must pass ours. You've got to remember, we're here to judge the planning as a planning situation. We're not here to look after people's personal problems, which I know is sad. You'd like to do that, and as I said, I'm sympathetic with the family, but I do feel that there was so little of it left, especially when we went the first time, that you have got to have a certain substantial piece of building to be able to call it a renovation and a rebuild. But as it looks, it is actually a new build in the countryside, which we don't allow. Once we allow that, you'll have the countryside covered in properties. We'll have no land left to farm. And I know I'm sounding rather hard, but I can't support this. I think that it is overstepping the mark, and I wouldn't be able to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pell. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. And I went to visit last time, and I'm still tussling with the understanding of why it is a new build and a new dwelling in the countryside. I'm really unsure. I was then, and I am again now. So if we don't approve this, we won't have a bat roost. We will not have the land tidied up. There'll be an eyesore, as been said before. So really, can you please, I'm sorry to keep, and you're having to repeat it again, but I really cannot understand the distinction. Someone tried to build something, it fell down for whatever reason. The footprint is still there, the actual concrete slab or whatever the slab's made of, is stone slab or whatever, is still there. So I'm really having difficulty understanding why it would be a new building. It's not like someone buying a piece of land and putting a completely new building on because there was a building there before. I'm struggling. Please help.
Okay, do you want to come in now, Amy?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's a couple of issues there. I'll just comment on all of them, and then Councillor Bond, come back to your specific question there. The reference was made to a previous appeal, which I think all members have had in relation to late correspondence. The particular appeal was at Brooklands in the Vale of Glamorgan, and it related to an enforcement notice which was served on a building identified or granted planning permission for a barn conversion, and the subject building was granted permission for a garage. What was actually built was a link between the existing residential barn conversion, and then the garage was then incorporated as part of the residential use. So it's classed as an extension to the existing property and not a new build, as in this case. And the inspector even amended the enforcement notice to change it to form part of a residential dwelling instead of into a residential dwelling. So the link actually just extended the residential use. The inspector then, in her summary, says that although she feels the building is similar in appearance to the one that was approved, there was nothing before her to suggest that the extensions to dwellings in the countryside is not acceptable in principle. However, in this case, there is very clear national and local policy to say that new build residential dwellings in the open countryside is contrary to policy. The appeal also related to buildings of a group of buildings. This is an isolated building on its own, and it also was adjacent to buildings of other residential use, other residential barn conversions. This again is a building completely isolated on its own. So whilst the appeal is helpful, I think there are quite a few differences in between the case before you today and that appeal. Again, I think I raise or reiterate the points that we too have significant sympathy with the applicant and the unfortunate chain of events that have led them to the position that they are in. However, the problem is the building is not there anymore, just to reiterate that. It is contrary to national and local policy, and the question as to whether there was a building there before, this is going to be a building here now, what is the difference? It is contrary to national policy as set out in Edition 12, that states in the open countryside, away from established settlements, recognised in development plans, or away from other areas allocated for development, the fact that a single house on a particular site would be unobtrusive is not, by itself, a good argument in favour of permission. Such permissions could be granted too often, and the overall detriment to the character of the area. In addition, there was comments made to, would the buildings be removed? The land would be left as it is now. It would be a mess. We wouldn't get the ecological betterment. The standing structures that have been constructed obviously do not have the benefit of planning permission, and therefore it would be an enforcement case to have those removed and the land repaired, brought back to its previous condition and an ecological value enhanced in that respect. So I think just reiterating on what the Head of Planning has mentioned, that before members today is an application for a new build residential property in the open countryside. It is clearly contrary to local and national policies. And whilst, again, as we have sympathy with the applicant, we do need to make sure that we are making decisions in line with the policy that you have in front of you, your LDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Councillor Buckley, you've spoken once. Was it just a point you wanted to raise?
Actually, thank you very much for indulging me, Chair. I think Amy's just actually explained there that this is an application for new build and not the rebuild of the previous application. But I do have one question for Amy, if I may, if that's all right.
Very briefly.
Okay. When you are rebuilding and a wall falls down, what is the difference between you using those stones to put them back up in the way that you would do if you were a farmer and a wall came down? Quite often stones come off or walls tumble down, and farmers go and they use those stones to rebuild. So what is the difference in terms of a rebuild for whatever reason a wall comes down, using those stones to make a repair, if you like? How does that sort of negate the rebuild? I don't quite understand that, but I do understand that this has gone to PEDU. So I wonder if officers could explain, if Amy could explain, please.
Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, the previous application that came to committee in December 2023 and was refused by members is with PEDU. It is subject to an appeal, and an inspector will make an independent decision and evaluate all of the facts that are relatively very similar in this application. So yes, that is before PEDU, and unfortunately, you don't know when an outcome of that decision will be. That's beyond our control. In terms of the building, why is it different? It is essentially a brand new construction. And I bring you back again to the phrase I've just reiterated out of Planning Policy Wales, Edition 12, that it might not be unobtrusive by itself. It might look very, very similar to how it did before, but in policy terms, it is a new building. All of the walls and the roof are no longer there. There was not a residential dwelling there beforehand. It was an agricultural storage building, and that has all been lost, and essentially it is a new build, and therefore that policy in PPW Edition 12 is what we are determining the application for, and is what members need to hold in their minds, which is that a single house on a particular site would be unobtrusive by itself, but a good argument, but not a good argument in favour of permission. Such permissions could be granted too often, and the overall impact on the character could be detrimental.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Anybody else want to? Councillor McConnell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I've visited this property twice. I've visited this property twice now. The agent speaking in support of the application talked about the uncompromising planning process, and we can't compromise in my heart, no, in my head, we cannot compromise the policies and rules which are set up to protect the open countryside. And that's my head talking. In my heart, if I could raise a magic wand and put that wall back, I would. Probably I will be voting against this application with a very heavy heart, and I will be hoping against hope that its review, its appeal is successful, which is an unusual situation for a member of this committee to be in. But for all the reasons that have been put forward, I don't think we can compromise the policies that are put there to protect our countryside. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McConnell. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak now? No? Yeah, no. Okay, Councillor Byrne, do you want to sum up?
Yes, thank you. Yes, and thank you, members, for considering this. I appreciate that there has been quite a considerable support for the application. I mean, my reading of the appeal case, obviously, perhaps Amy studied it in more detail than me, was really to do with the fact that it seemed to say that it was almost within the spirit of the policy. So for example, on policy H4, basically it says respecting the rural character and design of the buildings, so we'll get more or less a similar building. And it also says rebuilding works necessitated by poor structural conditions and or the need for new opening in walls should not involve substantial reconstruction, with structural surveys being required for marginal cases. Now, in terms of substantial reconstruction, I take that to mean, them building more or less an entirely different building. That's not the case here. And, obviously, I hope that in some senses the agent said that there wasn't any clear evidence it was fully demolished. So I'm not quite sure whether or not it's possible to incorporate policy H4. But also, as I said in the original thing, if it is accepted by the committee, the advantage is that we can add all of these conditions, which saves on any enforcement matters as well. So I think there's distinct advantages because and if it is rejected and appealed, I hope the inspector takes account of the views that have been expressed today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byrne. Amy, do you want to come in on those last points?
Yeah, just very quickly. In relation to the appeal, the inspector does find that that particular reconstruction was complete reconstruction and it did not align with one of the policies, or the Vale of Glamorgan's policy MD11. However, she does say, be that as it may, and in terms of the outcome that this policy seeks, I do not consider there to be a fundamental conflict. So in that respect, she did not feel that the reconstruction of an ancillary building or an extension to the barn conversion was contrary to the policy, as there are policies to allow extensions to barn conversions. I think in this case there are very limited scope for new build in the open countryside, and therefore that if she was considering this case, it may be that she might consider that there would be a fundamental conflict between the proposals for a new residential dwelling in the open countryside, as our policies don't support that, only in exceptional circumstances. I just wanted to clarify to members that the reasons for refusals, we're looking to amend or omit reason number 2, just so before a vote, everybody's very clear on what they are voting for. Should I read out the reason for refusal, just to be very clear?
Yes, please.
The proposed building, by virtue of a lack of existing lawful residential use on the site, is not considered to be a replacement dwelling. Therefore, the proposals fail to comply with LD policy H5. The application relates to the erection of a new dwelling in the open countryside without justification. This is contrary to policy S1 of the Monmouthshire Local Development Plan and National Planning Policy and Guidance within Planning Policy Wales and Technical Advice Note 6.
Okay, we have a recommendation from officers for refusal. Is anybody prepared to propose that we refuse? Councillor Powell, and seconded by Councillor Bryn. Richard, have you got the coming up? And I remind everybody that although the vote is for refusal, if they do not want to refuse it, then they vote against refusal. So can everybody vote now, please? Anne, have you voted?
Yes, I have.
I've lost contact, Chair.
We are within 2, so we need to do a roll call.
Okay, thank you, members. This is for refusal. So how are you voting, Councillor Bond?
I don't agree with this should be a private thing. I don't agree with this. I think we should do this again. It's a personal decision, and we're voting independently. I do not agree that we should be shared.
That's a practical dependence.
Yeah. Councillor Bond, we have such a close result. We're required to go to a named vote. So can you say whether you're prepared to refuse or not?
Or abstain.
Or abstain.
I'm against refusal.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Okay. Councillor Bromfield?
Against refusal.
Councillor Bryn?
For refusal.
Councillor Butler?
Against refusal.
Councillor Crook? Against refusal. Councillor Eason?
Against refusal.
Councillor Howells?
Against refusal.
Councillor McConnell?
For refusal.
Councillor Murphy?
Regretfully for refusal.
Councillor Powell?
For refusal.
Councillor Riley?
I've abstained. I'm not comfortable with this at all.
Okay. Councillor Rook?
For refusal.
And Councillor Webb?
For refusal.
Oh, God, look at it. It's even. Pio's got the casting vote, hasn't he? Has everybody voted?
Yeah, we have 6-6. I regretfully have to stay with my original vote because of policy. I don't want to, but I have to, so I'm for refusal.
It's refused.
Just to clarify then, that is refused.
Gosh, that was a close vote.
I knew it would be. I know it sounds hard, but you've got to stick by it.
Councillor Powell, your mic's on. Microphone's on.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair. The vote, we've got 13 votes, do we?
Yeah, there was...
No, well...
There was 13 votes. It was 6 for, 6 against and 1 abstain.
6 for, 6 against and 1 abstained, so that's 13 votes.
Yes.
13, yeah.
Are there not 12 of us here?
There was 13.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, sorry. I've just seen Jane on the screen. I didn't see Jane on the screen.
Jane wasn't in the vote.
No, Jane wasn't in on the vote.
So, sorry, Chair. 5 on screen, and there's 2, 5, 6, 7 here. So it's 12 votes.
That's right.
Yeah, we've got 13.
7, 8.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Apologies.
Yeah.
Councillor Powell, your microphone is on too.
Oh, sorry.
There's 8 in the room and 5 on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm content.
Are we all done?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, in that case, then I'd better move on, I think, and the next one is with regard to application DM 2024-00845, the proposed rear extension and Friends Porch extension at 4 Tanglewood Close, Abergavenny. We have Andrew to do that one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for the slides to come up.
Councillor Thomas, you want to come in now?
Okay, is Councillor Thomas with us? If I want to start without.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So yeah, this is a householder planning application that comprises 2 elements. Firstly, a porch to the front elevation and a rear extension. Dwelling is located fairly centrally in the town of Abergavenny in a residential cul-de-sac and in very close proximity to the fire station. Important just to clarify, members, why the application is before us today, particularly as it's a householder application. It was previously referred to the delegated panel via the ward member, Councillor Thomas, who's with us today. And following that meeting, the application has been referred to full committee via the delegated panel. And so whilst a number of members would have been there on site with us yesterday, I'll just run through the slides with you for the benefit of anyone that wasn't there yesterday, or just as a bit of a refresh. So that's an aerial image there. You can see the site. It's a small terrace of 4 properties, and this is on the very end where you can see the pinpoint, hopefully on screen. That's the property there. Just turning to the slides, we'll just run through these quickly. That is the application site, so they've got a parking space to the front, and then their garden goes to the rear and side, so it's a slightly larger plot than those elsewhere on the terrace. And you can also see the due north there, which is actually shown on that plan as well, so that's helpful just to get a sense of orientation. So that's the existing layout on screen. There you can see on the rear there's a very modest glazed sort of lightweight conservatory style extension presently, and on the front there is an existing sort of canopy style porch that's proposed to be replaced. Just going through the slides then for you. So that's the existing floor plans. So it's a 2-bedroom property, and you can see the internal arrangements. Just go through the elevations. So that's the small little canopy porch there that is proposed to be replaced. And that shows you there the existing rear and side, where you can see the glazed, say, conservatory style lightweight addition that's currently in situ. So taking us to the proposed plans, you'll see the layout there. So the rear extension is sort of a mixture of two-storey and a single-storey adjoining lean-to, and you can also see a larger footprint of the new proposed porch to the front. I think probably got floor plans here that we'll show next. So at ground floor, it'll provide one larger open space to be enjoyed, and then at first floor level, this provides an office space at first floor level. In terms of the elevations, so that, as you can see there, is the porch as the replacement porch, which is more solid and enclosed than what's currently there. And you'll see now the elevations. I'll discuss this in turn, but you'll note the way that's been drawn is helpful to indicate that there is an angle to this rather than being a more conventional shape. So I'll just quickly run through. I won't go too much further with those there. There are some illustrations on the next slides that show shadowing caused by the existing situation and that proposed. The applicant was correct to point out that these proposed relate to an earlier iteration of the plans without the corner that's been dissected off. So just to make that as a point of clarity. So in terms then of the officer evaluation and our recommendation to this afternoon, members, you'll note that this is a recommendation for a split decision in a means of determined application that's available to us, certainly where there's readily distinguishable items that can be discussed and considered separately. So for clarity, the porch to the front is recommended for approval, whilst the rear extension is recommended for refusal. So for clarity, I'll just discuss each element separately. So the porch to the front would represent a very simple and modest addition to the front of the property. If members were there yesterday or familiar with the immediate environment, there are similar examples of solid enclosed porches like that proposed readily available, and it's considered to be an entirely appropriate addition to the dwelling, and whilst it is slightly larger than the existing, officers are satisfied that it wouldn't compromise the parking offering to the two-bed dwelling, which is, as I set out, in a sustainable location close to the centre of the town. So that element is with a positive recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions. The rear extension, which, as I noted earlier, is part single-storey through lean-to form and part two-storey, is the area of concern for officers. And in particular, the two-storey element that will be sited in proximity to the boundary with the neighbouring dwelling number 3. Officers are grateful to the applicant who was fully engaged in the application process with us, and they've looked to make amendments to overcome these concerns. And this has included, as I stated previously, a corner of the two-storey element being removed to achieve compliance with the 45-degree line test. However, it's probably wise at this point just to refer back to the policy basis and the policy grounds on which we consider and determine applications. And relevant here is criterion D of policy DES 1, which states that development proposals will be required to maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties. So as a point of clarity here, officers are not of the view that the proposal would fail to maintain reasonable levels of privacy i.e. overlooking, or other areas that could cause loss of privacy and privacy invasion. Rather, it is the impact on amenity. Officers consider that the amenity of number 3 would be significantly harmed by the proposed two-storey extension by being overbearing and adversely impacting the enjoyment of the use of the rear garden of number 3. It should be noted, as members will have seen yesterday, that the gardens of Tanglewood Close are fairly modest, and officers do not consider that this adverse impact could be mitigated by applying reasonable planning conditions, and therefore it is reasonable to withhold planning permission. With regard to all other material considerations in respect of the rear extension, including design, visual impact, officers provide no objection. The recommended reason for refusal is solely on the proposed development's failure to provide and maintain reasonable levels of amenity of neighbouring properties, and in this case this is specific to number 3. So, in conclusion, the officer recommendation, as I said, is for a split decision. If members are minded to support this recommendation, can I please propose, as a point of clarity, to make an amendment to the reason for refusal to remove any reference to privacy? So, by that, I'll offer revised wording now, so that the reason would state as follows. By virtue of its scale and mass relative to the boundary with the adjoining property to north, the proposed two-storey extension would fail to maintain reasonable levels of amenity of the occupiers of neighbouring properties. The development is therefore contrary to policies DES 1D and EP1 of the adopted Monmouthshire Local Development Plan. So that would be just a small amendment to that reason. So on that basis, as I said, it is presented to members with a recommendation, a split decision to approve the porch and refuse the rear extension. Thank you, members.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And the local member wants to come in now, Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thanks. And I assume I've got 4 minutes.
You've got 6 minutes if you need them. You can have 4 and then 2 to sum up at the end, or take 6 now.
Okay. Thanks, members. I'm the local member for Park, obviously this is in my ward. I've been at the site a number of times, obviously with planning and with the subcommittee, etc. Certainly in terms of refusal, and that's been changed now. And I'm a bit surprised that the part of the refusal originally was privacy, and now that's been revoked actually online. Up until now, it was to do with privacy as well as lack of amenity. And in reality, I would disagree, and obviously I'm a layman, but really, if you go to those houses, there is a very limited view there, and obviously quite a limited garden in both in all properties in that very small estate. And I don't feel that this objection in terms of taking away of amenity is justified. It is a matter of subjection. It's quite difficult to actually decide what is taking away amenity or not. I'm also surprised that in the original application, the applicants were refused and advised to go to the 45-degree angle of the two-storey extension, and then that was refused. And to me, that seemed to be really a waste of their time and of their resources. They've undertaken a light survey. It will only affect light for 2 hours of the day in the summer. It does not affect light on the adjoining property number 3, other than 2 hours through the summer. The winter is fine. The issue of tunnelling, there isn't an extension in number 2. This extension is within reason. It's been angled at 45 degrees to mitigate that, and they've certainly complied with everything that MCC planning have put forward. And certainly in terms of privacy, I know it's not an issue now, but certainly in privacy, that's been mitigated as well. In terms of any objection, there was no objection, but an objection suddenly came in yesterday, which was obviously on the penultimate day of this planning application, and again, I'm surprised at that. And just to reiterate, they complied with the 45-degree angle. They're not significantly affecting neighbours' view of surrounding area. It's a very limited view because you have a hedge at the back of all properties, which is about 6 foot high. They've mitigated in terms of light, making sure that overshadowing doesn't affect next door. There's no obstruction of the skyline. There's no detrimental impact on diffuse daylight or vertical sky component, and there's no tunnelling effect. So, therefore, there is no overbearing or feeling of oppression. And certainly neighbours will be able to sit in their garden in the summer, sitting in the sunshine, growing plants, doing what they want to do. The proposal is designed so that even the current position of their washing line, for example, will not be affected. As I said, no objections raised during the statutory period, other than obviously yesterday, which was within the period, but I'm just concerned that came in at such a late stage. So I would make a plea, as a local member, having been there a number of times, for it to be approved as an extension, that they have the porch, but they also have the extension at the rear end of the property. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. We have a letter or email from the applicant. She's not well, and I think, Phil, you're going to go through that?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So this is a statement to be read out to members from the applicant in support of the proposal. So it's in note form, but you'll understand the gist of what is being said, even if it doesn't scan as smoothly as a properly written sentence-formed statement. So in terms of refusal, are you not maintaining reasonable levels of privacy and amenity? With, in brackets, effect on a neighbour's outlook, privacy, sunlight, daylight, and any noise or disruption of occupiers of neighbouring properties. It was initially proposed that a larger two-storey square-shaped extension would be built. We discussed it with neighbours before submission, and there were no objections. Taped out the area to ensure the proposal could be visualised. There were no concerns in terms of view, light, or otherwise. Winter and summer solstice or solar diagrams have been provided. Light may be impacted in the neighbour's bedroom for approximately 2 hours around lunchtime during summer, with no impact during winter, or no further impact during winter. Local Planning Authority guidance states it's unacceptable for, in quote, significant loss of light for the majority of the day, unquote. This is not the case. The Local Planning Authority concerned the extension could potentially reduce light if you apply the 45-degree rule. We've revised the proposal to comply with the Planning Authority, meeting the 45-degree rule. Informed the proposal would cause a sense of oppression or an unacceptable overbearing impact due to a tunnelling effect. The LDP policy DES1 or DES1 criterion D states a tunnelling effect is where a property is flanked on both sides and both sides block a light to a habitable room with regard to the 45-degree rule. Number 3 is flanked on both sides by 1.2 metre fencing, I presume. That's not finished in the statement. Compliant with the 45-degree rule. As my proposal does not join the boundary nor extend at right angles any further than the existing 1.2 metres and complies with the 45-degree rule, it cannot be deemed as causing a tunnelling effect, and therefore neither causing a sense of oppression or a sense of being overbearing. The proposal angles away from the neighbour, maintaining the feeling of space and light. And in terms of privacy, I'll read this out, notwithstanding that Andrew Jones has clarified that that's not part of the reason for refusal. So in terms of privacy, my bedroom window allows a full view of the neighbouring garden. The proposed window angles towards the rear of the gardens, has opaque glass, so will no longer be able to view next door. In terms of next door, will actually gain privacy. New winter and summer solstice diagrams were offered. The ones before you today relate to the original larger squarer proposal, not the revised scheme. We were informed a revision to those solar diagrams was not necessary. I've demonstrated that the proposal will maintain or even improve privacy and not affect amenity by complying with the 45-degree rule, thus not reducing light, not significantly affecting neighbours' view of surrounding area, meeting the criteria relating to annual probable sunlight hours, not causing overshadowing, and overshadowing is defined as receiving at least 2 hours of sunlight on the 21st of March, no obstruction of skyline, no detrimental impact on diffuse daylight or vertical sky component, and no tunnelling effect, thus no air overbearing effect or sense of oppression. Neighbours will remain able to enjoy sitting in sunshine in the garden. They'll be able to grow plants. The proposal is designed so even the current position of their washing line will not be affected. No objections were raised during the consultation period, which expired on the 1st of August, although it has been noted that a single objection received yesterday has been received. And I'll end that statement there. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Have we got anybody wishes to speak? I've got nobody on my...
There's nothing from...
It's higher up. Just get rid of all of the chat and you'll find it.
Apologies, I didn't see it. No, I didn't. It's wrong now. Oh, no, that's wrong.
Right, Councillor Prin.
Apologies, Chair. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, yeah, I think enclosed porches are very beneficial because they're great for heat retention, somewhere to keep your muddy boots, and I think it's great. My only concern was I couldn't see anywhere the length of the new proposed drive. I'd like confirmation that there's ample space for a vehicle to park on the drive following the erection of the porch, and I wondered if we could add a condition that no part of any vehicle parked on the drive following the erection of the porch should overhang the public pavement, causing a potential hazard to pedestrians, particularly residents with visual impairments. Diolch yn fawr.
Still can't see, I'll stick my hand up.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to come in at the end?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bryn. So the supplementary planning guidance in respect to parking spaces, say a parking space should be 4.8 metres by 2.6. So I've measured the plans before us, and the space maintained there is approximately, this is using the online measuring tool, would be at least next to the porch, 5.7 by 3.9. So more than enough space for a parking space. It is a sustainable location. It's only a 2-bed property. A condition requiring it not overhanging the boundary would fail the conditions tests in the condition circular. It wouldn't be a precise or enforceable condition. But for the reasons stated, there is considered to be sufficient space. This isn't adding any additional bedrooms. And it is, say, very close to the town centre. So from a parking, highway sustainability perspective, officers are satisfied that it's acceptable as proposed and wouldn't require any sort of mitigation via planning condition.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was there yesterday, so I saw all about it. I'm perfectly happy with the front porch because as we looked round, there were several other houses with exactly the same size and type of porch. That's fine. But I'm not happy with that at the rear of the house because they are very small houses and they're very small gardens, and I think that it would be overbearing. If it was only single story, I think it'd be easier to accept it. But to have it double story, I wouldn't be happy because I think it makes it, the houses are so small, it's a bigger piece sort of than it really would expect. If they were bigger houses, it wouldn't stand out so much. But I'm not happy with the extension to the rear, and I wouldn't vote for that.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Anybody else want to contribute? Councillor McConnell.
Yes, I've also, thanks for the report, and I visited there yesterday. I'm just trying to wrap my brains through the training I've done, but an explanation of so much has been, it struck me on the site yesterday that the adjoining house was going to feel very crammed in. Now that's a sort of subjective statement. So just some clarity about, and there's been some doubt about light and shade because of the now out-of-date diagram showing light and shade. So just some explanation about amenity and overbearingness in a formal way would be really helpful. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll certainly do my best. Before I do that, though, I just want to perhaps pick up on a couple of points on the same subject that Councillor Thomas had articulated, and there was a few suggestions within that, and apologies if I've interpreted those wrong, about impacts on view, etc. That's not what we're suggesting, the rights review, as we know through experience and training, that's not a material consideration. It's certainly not being put forward here. The issue of privacy as well, as I say, that was suggested because that's the officer view, and that's what the report had sort of taken that debate to, and it was just a point of correction on the reason for refusal. In terms specifically to the councillor's point in terms of amenity, that is, as I say, primarily due to an overbearing impact, and that leads to some of the points that Councillor Powell has made in terms of the context. And context is always important because an extension on one property, one context, may have a different impact to that on a different property with a different size plot, a different orientation in terms of north-south. The plans we had on earlier did helpfully show the gardens. If you stood in the garden and looking across the rear, you're not immediately looking due north, but it's fairly close. And that limited space that's available, and whilst officers acknowledge and accept and thank the applicant to the level in which that they've engaged, it has been to a very high level, that doesn't override the fact that when one would be using that limited private amenity space at number 3, a two-story extension, even with a section dissected, would give a feeling, in officers' view, that is quite an overbearing feature. It's not right up to the boundary, or not on the exact boundary, but it's very close. At present, the existing single-story glazed extension is extremely lightweight. It's significantly different. Had this been the single-story element, had the extension been flipped in reverse, it may have led to a different officer recommendation. I understand there's some practical construction reasons as to why that hasn't been pursued. It's an obvious suggestion that officers have made, but I understand there are reasons why that's not been proposed, and that's not what is before us today ultimately, and that's what we're here. But that sense of overbearing, I say, is using that private amenity space, which is amplified when it's that space immediately to the rear of your property, and when that space is small, limited, as it is in this particular context, we don't feel that a two-story extension would maintain reasonable levels of amenity. And that's to say that's the policy test, and that's our starting point. Does it maintain that? I hope that's, I trust, answered your query, Councillor. Apologies if I haven't, please come back. But I hope that summarises where, as officers, we're viewing this to confirm it's not a privacy issue. Isn't a right to review. So if it obliterates wonderful views, it's not a reason to withhold planning permission, and that's not what we're suggesting.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I got nobody else on my list for speaking, so I know you want to come back in, Andrew. So do you want to do that first?
Jan's just.
Sorry, Chair. I was having some difficulty in raising my hand.
Okay, coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Am I right in my understanding that the officers are recommending that this is a joint application, and that that we are recommending the approval of the porch but not of the rear extension, or are they two separate applications? Just clarification, please.
That's the office of recommendation. We'll test that in a minute to see whether members are happy to vote like that or whether we need to split it. So
Thank you very much.
I'll let Andrew sum up and then we'll come back to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Councillor Butler, I was just beat me to it there. I thought it would be worthy to provide an explanation of that. So, as I said at the outset, where a planning application includes multiple elements, where those elements can be readily separated. In this case, an extension to the front and the rear can, for example, it could be a garage, an extension. These elements can be readily separated, and Welsh Government and certainly PEDU are keen that local planning authorities explore these, the right to do this more frequently. It does then mean, for example, where parts are refused, elements aren't held up by that, can be approved, and applicants, developers can get on with the elements that are acceptable and given planning permission. So just to confirm, the Office of Recommendations is that it's one application, one development description. The recommendation is for a split decision to grant planning permission for the porch to the front and to refuse planning permission for the extension to the rear, subject to the reason I gave at the start of the presentation, that it is on amenity grounds only, not privacy. Hopefully, I trust that's clarified, but again, please come back if not.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We have a recommendation for a split decision. Can I have somebody propose that, please?
I'll propose that.
Okay, so it's Councillor Powell and seconded by Councillor McConnell. Is everybody happy that we vote along those lines then? So if we can have the function up then, please, Richard. So just to make it clear, we got the Office of Recommendation. Your hand there, it wasn't in the.
I just wondered how that would leave somebody feeling if they didn't think there should be approval for either.
Yeah,
there isn't that.
Yeah, vote against it at the moment, and then we'll pick that up.
Okay, thank you.
Michael's off.
One to go.
We're one to go. Is everybody happy that they voted?
It's clear.
Well, it's clear. Yeah.
So yeah, that split decision has been approved, so in favour with Officer Recommendation, 11 for and 2 against.
Had it have been closer, we would have had to have organised a different vote. But, yeah, okay. Yeah, it was clear. Okay, that's the end of the applications, but we have some items on appeals and costs for information. Phil, you're doing that, have you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just get the presentation back up and go down to the right bit. That's it. So the first appeal was retention of an advert in St Mary Street, Chepstow, so in the heart of the conservation there in Chepstow. So it was an appeal against refusal of permission to retain the advert, which had been put up without permission. You can see that it's a very big fascia sign, externally illuminated, which isn't a problem in itself in that it's a business that opens in the evening, so you could accommodate external illumination, but it's the actual size, design, materials of the advert which is entirely inappropriate in the conservation area. You'd be looking for something far more subtle and suitable, really, to advertise the business. So that was obviously supported by the inspector, who concluded it was unacceptably harmful to the visual amenity of the area and fails to preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. So we'll be in discussions really with the business now in the light of that to find alternative signage which is far more appropriate and does not harm the character or appearance of the conservation area. So that was that appeal. The second one was an application near Shire Newton. You can see it on the left-hand plan there. So you've got the main part of Shire Newton, Monmouth Bark, down in the south there. You can see the bottom property down there's the Carpenter's Arms on the main road, so that kind of orientates where you are. There's a driveway that goes down towards the stream. And it's an old Welsh Water site down there, which is no longer obviously used by Welsh Water. It's used for sort of quasi-industrial purposes for storage. And there was a proposal to adapt one of the buildings to residential use, adapt and extend it, and build 2 other new build residential units. Well, it's a development. It would be a development in the open countryside, unsustainable location, and wouldn't be supported by national and local policy. And the access was also considered. There was insufficient detail to indicate the access could be safely made off the B road there. So again, that was dismissed. Dismissed for clear policy reasons. So yeah, for 3 dwelling units in the open countryside in effect. So sorry, that's showing how it would have been developed. So a pair of semis and adaptation of they're very sort of utilitarian buildings on site, so they're not the sort that would be adaptable for residential use in any case. And no exception policy, for instance, for rural enterprise or One Planet development was offered for this development, so it couldn't be supported in policy terms. And then we had the site which we'll be familiar with committee because it's been here a few times at 5 Lanes, or known as Water Pits, or land northwest of Holly Cottage. You'll remember that there was enforcement case here where they carried out work to create some sort of equestrian facility there in the past without planning permission. So there were 2 facets to this appeal. There was an enforcement appeal in relation to the unauthorised works they carried out in terms of sorry if I haven't got I was going to show you a slide of the gates. If you remember, there was some fencing and gates that had been put up which were out of character with the locality. So the enforcement notice sought to require the applicant to the appellant to reduce those to a metre high or remove them in their entirety, and that was upheld in the notice. There's also hard standing there to be removed there, and there were other works there, lighting, etc., that would need to be actually an installation of a septic tank, which would need to be removed to accord with the enforcement notice. All of those elements were upheld on appeal. There was a couple of elements that one wasn't included in the notice because it considers a change of use of land, not operational development. That was a caravan, so that wasn't included on the notice, so not part of this decision. And secondly, there was a storage container that officers had felt had been operational development because of its size and degree of permanence, but the inspector found that in theory that could be lifted and moved around and wasn't operational development in that sense, so excluded that from the terms of the enforcement notice. But in effect, the vast majority of the terms of the notice was upheld by the inspector, so we'll be following that up with the applicant. Having said that, there was, as you'll remember, a refused planning permission for works here, and it was refused for a number of different reasons, including effect on the character of the area of the land, highway safety, and impact on ecology. The inspector found that the development was relatively small scale, was of appropriate character within this rural setting for private equestrian use, and is conditioned that permission as conditioned that it's only used for private purposes, not as the commercial stables and equestrian facility. So there's retention of the, there's no retention of, these are all elements of new build and new proposals. So they've granted planning permission for this revised scheme, storage building, small stable block, manege, and new hedge planting. No hard surfacing proposed in this plan, though there is a condition that they need to discharge to come in with hard surface details if they do want some. And the public footpath would be separated by a new hedgerow. So that has been approved on appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, thanks, Phil. That brings us to the end of the meeting. So thanks everybody. That was a difficult one in many respects, but thanks for your attention anyway. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.